Chapter 29, Coming Clean. I spend the next week writing down my resentments, only taking breaks to go to pledges for meetings. By now, I'm on the last section, where I write down the part I played in each resentment. Whether I had overly high expectations, or was being competitive, or said something nasty before the person yelled at me, or whatever it was. It's starting to become incredibly surreal to remember details about all these things that I'd somehow forgotten or my ego had caused me to repress. Yet owning up to my part doesn't feel shameful. It's actually a relief, because it makes me believe my future can be less messy. You don't need to do it like a speed demon, Rachel says when I tell her that I'm almost done. Most people take months. Some people take years. I know, I say, I'd heard as much. But for some reason, as soon as I started writing, some compulsion deep inside kept propelling me forward at this rapid-fire pace. I didn't even know if I could stop. It's like I sensed that if I didn't take action now, I might lose my willingness, and I didn't want to risk that. It was hard to believe what I was learning about myself. Essentially, that except for my grandfather, who used to call me stupid for no particular reason, I played a part in every single resentment I had. I'd either had unrealistic expectations or done something to provoke whatever I was now angry about. Cain, for example, couldn't have screwed me over if I hadn't acted completely inappropriate and unprofessional in the first place. Even my grandfather and my parents, whose transgressions against me always felt almost too numerous to mention, were just doing the best they could at the time. If I was too young to have played a part in what they did, my part today was that I was continuing to hold on to the resentment. At the pledges meetings, I listen carefully to what other people are saying, and also share about all the realizations I'm having. For the first time, I'm not saying things that I hope will get a laugh or demonstrate how articulate I am. I finally understand what people mean when they say that talking about things in a group helps them to make sense of their emotions, that it doubles your joy and cuts your pain in half. And if they were right about that, is it possible they're right about a whole lot of other things? A few days later, I sit in Rachel's fern-filled apartment and read her everything I have, an entire 100-sheet notebook's worth. And then I read some more, and smoke, and read some more. She nods and smokes with me, occasionally taking notes on a yellow legal pad. You must be bored stiff, I say when we're getting into our 4th hour. Not at all. Remember, you're being of service by allowing me to hear all this. People at pledges talk a lot about being of service and how listening to someone else talk about their problems takes them out of their own heads. They talk about how almost all the problems we alcoholics have are the same, most of them related to pride and fear, and how sponsoring gives them the opportunity to say something they probably need to hear themselves. To be honest, I assume that most of them were full of it. But I'm looking at Rachel, and since she's a teacher and not an actress, and Pledges is always telling us how important it is that we work a program of, quote, rigorous honesty, I assume she's telling the truth. So I keep reading and reading and reading until after the sun goes down and my last page has been turned. When I'm done, Rachel presents me with a list of my defects, and even though the list includes words like selfish, self-seeking, manipulative, and dishonest, it doesn't make me feel at all bad about myself. It makes me feel hopeful that I may be able to conquer the kinds of problems I've had my whole life, since long before I took my first drink. She tells me to go home, read through the first part of the Blue Book, and think about these defects. It's that easy? I ask. I just think about them and then I'm done? Done? She asks, laughing. More like just getting started. Amelia, we already went through this on our hike, remember? Stephanie says, blowing dust off her keyboard. You don't have anything else to apologize for. I'm sitting in her office, bizarrely nervous, considering I'm with someone who I know loves me unconditionally. It's my first time in the building since the day I fled Robert's office, and I know that's where I'm going next. Please, just listen, I say. And then I tell her that although I already apologized to her for being selfish, I haven't changed my behavior at all. I'm still always calling her in the midst of a crisis and then abandoning her as soon as it's over. I finish by saying, I haven't been treating you the way I want to be treated, and I want to start doing that now. Stephanie looks completely shocked and then blurts out, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, I respond. Unless there's something I can do to make up for what I've done. She shakes her head. Can I hug you now? I nod, and we both stand up and embrace. As we hug, I tell her I love her and notice she's crying. In some ways, you were easier to handle before, she says, and we both laugh. When I walk into Robert's assistant's office and ask if it's possible for me to speak to him, his assistant, Celine, looks terrified. Rachel had told me that I wasn't allowed to react to anyone's behavior during this amends tour, so I just smile. "Hang on," Celine says, scooting quickly out of her seat and into Robert's office. As I stand there, Brian walks by, his head down as he reads a fax. "Brian," I say, and he looks up. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" Not looking terribly surprised, Brian nods just as Robert opens his door. We walk in and take the exact same seats we had the day I was fired. I waste no time, launching directly into how sorry I am for being such a self-absorbed, entitled prima donna. I apologize for acting inappropriately with the celebrities I interviewed, for not respecting the people above me and the rules, for having a sense of entitlement born purely out of insecurity. Finally, I apologize for doing coke at work. I end by saying that I thought I deserved to be fired, and then something entirely unplanned escapes from my mouth. "I'm actually really grateful it happened," I say, "because it helped me get to where I am now." "Well, Robert says, and then lapses into the muteness that seems to be his trademark. But for the first time since we met, he's looking at me with kindness. Brian glances from Robert to me and then breaks into a smile. "I'm proud of you," he says. The rest of my apologies go as well as can be expected. I call Chris and ask him if we can meet for coffee. At the Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf on Beverly, I explain that I took out my own shame about my wild behavior on him and couldn't ever be direct with him about it. I also apologize for mocking him and Mitch in my column. He nods, informs me coldly that he still thinks I'm a bitch, and all I can say is, "You may be right." Rachel had advised me to use those words if I ever felt like I was about to react negatively to someone while I was apologizing. I show up at Chad Milan's office, and his assistant at first tells me he doesn't have time to see me. Just as I'm getting up, though, Chad wanders out to the hall and says he wants to hear what I have to say just to satisfy his curiosity. I end up telling him, here in the halls of CAA with about 1 trillion suits wandering by every millisecond, about my addiction and recovery. Rachel had said that I didn't need to go and explain that I was an alcoholic to every last person I spoke to, that, in fact, it could be considered a cop-out because I might try to use that as an excuse for my behavior. But for some reason, this is how I explain it to Chad. I add that this in no way makes me feel like I'm entitled to some kind of a get-out-of-jail-free card, but I just wanted him to know that I think he's a nice guy and deserved to be treated better. He doesn't exactly throw his arms around me, but he doesn't have me escorted out of the building either. I drive over to Holly's office and imagine, but a serious-looking, bespectacled brunette is sitting where Karen used to. I ask if Holly's available, and the girl, who introduces herself as Samantha and explains that she's a temp, says that Holly's in meetings at Universal all day. So I sit down in the waiting room and write Holly a note, apologizing for bailing out on the job and for not giving it the energy it deserved. I add that she should call me if she wants to talk further. I put the note in an envelope that I leave with the temp. Rachel had made it clear to me that I should try to make all my amends in person, but if there were people I couldn't get to or felt too uncomfortable to see, it would be okay to email them or write a letter. Since Justin's voicemail is full, I send him an email. I write that I'm sorry for acting like his relapse was some personal slight against me, for only calling him when I needed him and essentially abandoning him the minute he told me he wasn't sober. I also ask him to call me whenever he wants to because I'd like to say these things to him in person. I call Rachel to tell her about the amends I've made, and she says I'm off to a great start. As Rachel and I talk, the other line keeps ringing, and I notice Nadine's 212 number on my caller ID. She's been trying to schedule this trip to New York for me to be on The View, and I can only put her off for so long. So, even though I'm not remotely sure I can keep doing the column, I say goodbye to Rachel. Then I click over and tell Nadine I'm sorry I haven't called her back, but that I can go to New York whenever she wants me to. "Fantastic, sweetie," she trills. "They'd love to have you on tomorrow, so how about the red eye tonight?" Looking around the apartment, I see that it's in complete disarray and realize it doesn't matter. I'm tidying up what's inside, not what's on the outside, I think. Nadine tells me she'll make the reservation and send a car to take me to the airport. After packing, I sit down to make my final apology for the time being, to Adam. Rachel and I had decided it was okay for me not to make this apology in person because face-to-face, I might try to manipulate and cajole him into asking me out. Like with the others, I want to make it simple, direct, and absolutely devoid of motive. So I write him an email saying I'm sorry for lashing out about his date because he wasn't doing what I wanted him to do. I add that I appreciate his questioning me over why I do something for a living that I didn't believe in. It was helping me, I wrote, to look at my life and my actions in a new way. When I send the email, I realize that I don't want anything from Adam anymore. My feelings for him are still there, but I now see that if he doesn't want me, there's really no point in my pining for him. It's clearly not meant to be. The feeling that he has to be my boyfriend is simply gone, just like that. Then I realized something even more shocking. My desire to drink and do coke is also gone. I've heard people talk in meetings about how their urge to drink or do drugs had suddenly been removed, and I'd always gaze at them somewhat skeptically. But I guess I'm now living proof that it can happen. As I sit here thinking about how serene I feel, a wonderful idea occurs to me. So I make a call, asking someone to meet me in New York. Who have I become, I wonder, as I walk down my driveway to the waiting town car. As I get inside, I realize I don't really have the answer to that yet.